very, very pleased to be part of this afternoon's conversation with this very fine panel of industry leaders and have a chance to talk about some of the issues that are facing us. We have both music publishers and performing rights societies represented here today, and I'm going to introduce them all by name and by organization and by city. If I told you about their illustrious backgrounds, that would be the extent of the whole panel. So, and I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about the issues. So immediately to my left is Eric Baptiste from SOCAN, based in Toronto. And yes, big round of applause for Eric, please. He's my boss. Thank you. To the left of him is Justin Kalifowitz from Downtown Music Publishing, also based in New York. Welcome, Justin. And next to him is Paul Williams, representing ASCAP, based in Los Angeles. I should probably add legendary songwriter Paul Williams. And then next to him is the also legendary Mary Megan Peer, representing Peer Music and based out of New York. So it's interesting for me to be moderating a panel that's a combination of performing rights societies and publishers, because we've had a very highly entwined and complicated relationship right from the very beginnings. To explore all of the ins and outs of that would be like thinking about every single family dinner you've ever had and thinking about every slight and every joke, but over the past 5 generations. So let's start with the premise that, like an awful lot of families, some days we love each other, some days we don't so much love each other. But regardless of that, the relationship between publishers and societies is very, very well entrenched. Now, that's a controversial statement these days because some of the multinational publishers have made known that they are giving consideration to withdrawing their rights from ASCAP and from BMI, maybe go to other societies, maybe go it alone, maybe go to third parties. Now, in our world right now, this is sort of the biggest question, so we might as well start with addressing that elephant in the room. And I'd like to ask all of our panelists, do you think the big publishers can manage on their own without any society membership at all? And why don't we start with you, Eric?
I knew I was seated in the wrong seat. And it seems you know my family, Catherine.
Sorry?
It seems you know my family based on your remarks. It's of course difficult for somebody who is the head of a performing rights organization to have a completely objective and independent view of this, and I'm sure that my neighbors who come from the publishing business will have their own views, but I believe that the system that has been put in place over the years, in which rights holders, music creators, but also their publishers, entrust societies which are, in their vast majority, not-for-profit organizations that are trying to manage as efficiently as possible. That system has produced a lot of value for the rights holders over the years. And that value has been upheld, even within the crisis that the music business overall has been going through in the past few years. If you look at all the problems that our friends and colleagues in the record business have had to experience and the shrinkage of their turnover, and you compare that with the amounts that societies in the US and Canada and basically around the world have been able to collect over the years and distribute to the rights holders. This has been moving in the opposite direction. This has been growing and growing in real terms, not a small achievement. Granted, this has been made possible by the growth of businesses that we license, but it's important for people to remember that we have been growing the pie. We have been bringing in more revenue for the songwriters, the composers, and their publishers over the years in an environment that has never been as challenging. So before anyone decides to throw the baby in with the bathwater, I think it's important to take a deep breath and think. Having said that, nothing is perfect. There are horrible regulatory situations in many countries, one of the worst being the United States, of course, in which our friends ASCAP and BMI are constrained by decades-old antiquated systems known as consent decrees that I'm sure my neighbors will discuss later on. We also have to continue improving our operations be quicker, even more transparent than we are today, even more agile in reaching market deals with new business models. But by and large, the system has worked, continues to work, and we should reform it together rather than abandon ship.
So that would be a no then, right? That would be no, they can't manage on their own?
I'm not sure they can manage. I'm not sure they can manage it on their own, but I'm saying they should not.
Okay.
If I may, can I request that you turn on some monitors up here so we can, I can't hear the questions and I couldn't hear Eric's brilliant comments, but I want to thank him for the things that he said that I didn't hear, because I'm absolutely sure that I agree with him 100%. But it would be really, really lovely if we could have some sound up here, so I don't just hear, so you don't see a lot of a little old guy up here going, hey, what did he say, what did he say? And people will turn to each other and say, and that's the chairman of ASCAP, they're in great trouble. The fact is that I assume you're talking about the major withdrawal?
Yeah, I was just going to say, all you folks back there in the black shirts, have some of you heard Paul's concern here? Is there a way to hear better sound up here?
It has been improved. It has been improved.
It has improved?
Yeah, that's going to help a lot. Thank you.
Yes.
The fact is that ASCAP this last year, first of all, we processed 250 billion performances last year. That's going to double this year. That's 500 billion performances. And there's not an organization in the world that can do as well as what ASCAP, as what SOCAN, as what performing rights organizations do. Our major goal is to remain flexible and find a way so that we do nothing to stop the music. We do nothing to stop the music. I don't know if you've talked at all to anybody about Music Mark, but we'll be talking about that later. Creating a single access point so BMI, ASCAP and SOCAN at this point can have a single place to register your copyrights. If you take a look at it, especially you jump into almost any genre, but especially urban, you'll find a copyright sometimes with so many writers, so many publishers. How in the world do you make it easier with all the different organizations? How do you make that easier and easier for people to register their works and keep track of them? That's something that Eric has developed with John LaFermenta, who's head of ASCAP, and BMI is involved. Instead of shoving each other out of the way at this point to say, wait a minute, we're giving out $850 million to our writers every year, we're going to keep doing it. Instead of doing that, we're locking arms and beginning to communicate much better. We've been great partners for long before I was chairman of ASCAP. But the fact is that the tempo of what's being done right now is accelerated. The mood of what's being done right now is positive and constructive. And I think that at this point, if I was a major publisher, I would say, you know what? With the things that are changing with the consent decree, or looking at the consent decree, there's a possibility for a major retuning of the copyright law in our country. If I was a major publisher right now, I would say, you know what? The last thing I'm going to do is endanger that steady, transparent flow of income to my writers and publishers, and right now, to my writers and other sub-publishers. I'm not going to do anything that endangers that flow of income, because things are changing in the world of PRO, and they're changing for the better.
Thank you. So we have two impassioned responses in terms of the publishers staying within the PRO world. So, Mary Megan, what do you think?
Well, I think the question you started with is whether or not the publishers could withdraw and license their rights. And I think the answer to that, we've got to really look at what we've just heard. Licensing performance rights and collecting them is a really complicated game. And I think the fact that this is seriously being considered in the U.S. just shows that we're in an outdated legislative environment today. The fact that major publishers would consider dealing with licensees individually, not only negotiating licenses, but collecting from them and then doing the distribution themselves, really shows that we're in an environment where being economically relevant and really representing your songs is increasingly difficult.
the interesting, if I could just an addendum to that, the fact is that the right to withdraw a portion of your music has always existed. It's always been there. The sensible thing was always to leave it with ASCAP. I think that if I was looking at the marketplace 2 years ago, I probably would have, and I was just a major publisher, I would have gone, well, wait a minute, I understand looking at both sides now, but as we sit here right now where copyright is being re-examined, the thing that I think is probably the key information on the table is look at the calendar. What's this going to look like in a year and a half with Maria Palante in the Copyright Office looking carefully at copyright and needing to change? With all of a sudden, we're finally in a place where we're really looking at the consent decree. The consent decree is the same age as me. I do pretty well. My hearing's not as good as it used to be, but I, pretty much get around. I don't get lost between the bedroom and the bathroom. I've got, everything's working pretty well. The consent decree is 70 years old. The last time it was updated was 20 years ago, before the iPod existed. So we have something that is binding us in the consent decree in the way that we have to operate under the rules of the consent decree that are totally outdated to today's music. This is an amazing time in music. This is a spectacular time where people are remixing and adding, and there's more music being played more often than any on more spectacular devices than ever before in the history of music. A company like Pandora will wind up with 75 million people listening to our music. Do we want them to fail? No. We want them to succeed. And if we look at copyright law right now, if we continue talking to the Justice Department in the fashion that we are, and I'm not going to get into that, I think that we're looking at an environment where things are changing. And a year and a half from now, I think things could be very different. I don't think I would endanger, if I was a major publisher, I would never endanger this beautiful, wonderful operating system that is transparent, immediate. We don't sit on the money. The PROs give the money to our members and our publishers right away. I wouldn't endanger that. I would stay right where I am and watch what happens in the next year. My 2 cents.
Justin, do you think the publishers could abandon this beautiful, wonderful operating system?
I sort of echo Mary Megan's comments. If you were to think about the undertaking that they're considering, it's massive. It is, if you talking to the NMPA, you would see that performing rights make up roughly 1/3 of the publishing revenue in the U.S. To think that they're going to jeopardize that or look at alternative ways, you sort of see both sides. On the one hand, the challenge of moving it outside of the current system is enormous. On the second side, you look at what they're hampered with. You look at the consent decree and you say, this is a real problem. We're not getting paid market rates. And when you think about that challenge, I think if you think about the PROs, would we be having this argument? Would anyone be having a conversation about pulling out of the PROs if it wasn't for the consent decree? I think the answer is no. I think you would have a different conversation, which is the major publisher is probably looking for some more efficiency. I think if the PROs, I think that would be the conversation. I don't think it would be about pulling out. It would be how could we collaborate to work closer together to create a more efficient way to pay our songwriters.
One of the things that's going on right now is a new bill in Congress called the Songwriters Equity Act, and it's kind of it's something that fixes a small piece of the puzzle. And if I may, the way that the consent decree basically operates is if somebody asks for a license, we give them the license. We cannot say no. We don't have the right to refuse, and we don't want the right to refuse. We want to be able to give the license to somebody to play everybody's music, let the world enjoy it, and pay us something that is a fair amount for that licensing fee and all. Well, what has happened is and we've been licensing online for 20 years at ASCAP. You guys have been doing the same, I know. So all of a sudden we're in a position where there is the occasional Pandora, for example, that says, no, we don't want to pay this time. This, incidentally, of the $1, there's like 54 cents paid for the second copyright, the copyright for the recorded material, and 4 cents for the initial copyright. The way the law stands right now, the way our agreement with Justice Department works right now, it basically says that if we can't agree, we have to go to rate court. And I'm probably explaining that, this is like singing to the chorus, to the choir, church choir about God. But the fact is that we have to go into a rate court, and the rate court hears both sides, and they make a choice. We have not been able, for endless, I don't know how long it's been now, 20 years or something, we've not been able to go into rate court and say to the judge, This is what we're getting, and this is market value. This is what the rest of the other copyright is getting. We're not allowed to quote the simple truth of what we're getting compared to the rest of the world to that judge. 114I will fix that for us. It's a small piece of the puzzle, but what it does is it allows us to go in and count on the intelligence of a really bright judge to go, wait a minute. They're getting that much and you're getting that much. That isn't fair. There's a second addendum to this that needs to be said. In the bill as it's written, this cannot change the effect. This cannot have a negative effect on the other copyright. In other words, we're not looking to take any part of that money. All we want is the judge to look at what we're doing, be able to see how small our percentage is, and respond to that. So the Songwriters Equity Act, which Congressman Collins introduced as a great friend of music creators, is the tip of the iceberg, the first more noticeable change in what I hope will make a difference in all of our lives. And in yours, if you're a music lover, music user, or if you're a server to music to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Paul. Well, we've been talking a lot today about the consent decree and through some of the other panels and about the implications of it, but we are here in Toronto and this is not American legislation. So, Eric, as a Canadian on the panel, why should we care about the consent decree and care about the possibility of the multinational publishers pulling out of ASCAP and BMI? What are the Canadian and the global implications of that?
Well, how far away is the U.S. border? This is the closest country to Canada, and it's the biggest one in the world, and it's one that in the music world at least is really a unified market. There's no real border between Canada and the U.S. as far as music creation and production is concerned. But there is, as you said, Catherine, a big difference in the legal system. For example, SOCAN gets exclusive assignments of the rights, and ASCAP and BMI doesn't get that. It's non-exclusive. There are lots of differences, and if any publisher were to withdraw the rights from the US PRO system, we take the position here at SOCAN that it would not impact SOCAN immediately because we get the writers' shares of the songs from our agreements with ASCAP or BMI or others, but the publisher's share is flowing through the local companies here. So the impact would not be immediate. We would not lose overnight a significant portion of the rights we represent here in Canada, but the impact would be indirect and profound around the world. The US PROs, the main two ones, ASCAP and BMI, are one of those very rare organizations that are in the billion-dollar league. They collect, distribute about $1 billion a year to their affiliates for BMI or members for ASCAP. We are in Canada, so we are smaller than that, of course. And there are not that many organizations that are that important. The other ones are in Japan and in Europe. And without any disrespect, of course, to our European colleagues, I'm chairing the board of the World Body of Societies, so I like everybody, of course, in that capacity. But I think that we are doing things a bit differently in North America. We care passionately about the music, we care passionately about the people behind, but we are above all behaving like businesses. And this is something that is important. We are ethical businesses, but we are businesses, and there's an efficiency, a transparency, a speed to market that is kind of unique, and that any weakening of ASCAP and BMI would weaken this entrepreneurial, transparent, and business-like approach to the art of managing the rights of songwriters and composers. That would be very bad. And if we deconstruct, if the American legislators or the system leads anyone to deconstruct the system, it will happen in other countries as well, because the US is the US. It's a very big example. In many things, the US is a good example. And in the way they manage intellectual property and the legal framework and all those things, I'm not sure it's the best example possible, but it is an example. So other countries will follow suit. Other countries will do that. Countries that are much weaker, countries that have a much weaker music industry, and the results will be catastrophic around the world. I'm not advocating for no change. I said that already. The reasons why change is necessary have been compelling. And Mary Megan and even Laurent Hubert this morning very clearly mentioned the fact that there are problems that need to be resolved. But let's work together in resolving those problems. They matter to everyone around the world, not just US creators and US publishers. And let's work together to make sure that the people in DC, in Washington, in Congress, and everywhere else understand the stakes, and that we fix this antiquated system and restore the collective management system environment in the US to a freer system that enables everybody to benefit from it. We're going to play our part. Paul and John, the CEO at BMI, and others, they know that they can count on SOCAN to do whatever we can if we are welcome there. You can count on CISAC, the World Federation, if ever you need this help, because we're in this together. We want the system to be improved. We want the system to be even better than it is today. And together, I think we can.
So this isn't the only issue we're going to talk about today, but I have one more question on this subject before we move on, and I'd like to know from Mary Megan and from Justin, if this does happen, if the multinational publishers do pull out of the societies, what are the implications for publishers like you? You run a global business, you run a very successful business, but they're not on the scale of the multinationals. So what would the implications be?
Well, Catherine, I think it really depends on how the withdrawals would happen. As we've heard today, these things are very much in flux. And there's a couple different ways this could play out, and until we know how it plays out, we won't really know how it's going to affect us.
Okay.
One of the big issues is if the majors did withdraw, if they would still be able to have the PROs administer the licenses that they negotiated separately. If that's the case, then it might not change things for other publishers that much who continue to go through the PROs in the traditional manner. If that is not the case, and they are not allowed to leave administration with the PROs, and they either have to bring it in-house or find another third-party provider or do some combination of the two, then I think it changes things a lot for publishers that elect to remain in the PRO system. There's a lot of economies of scale that go into performance licensing, and if we take that scale and have it, the rest of us are going to have much higher costs in terms of licensing.
Okay, Justin, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think the way we look at it is we're tasked on behalf of our songwriters with finding the most efficient way to collect their royalties from around the world, to protect their rights, and also to provide them with the data about how their copyrights are being used. And when echoing what Mary said again, you look at how the publishers are going to pull out, and what that's going to leave us with, and what options are going to come out from it. At our business, we've built a platform called Song Trust, which manages about 220,000 copyrights now. And looking at how we work, there are a lot of licenses which we're doing direct in the United States. Of course, they're not performing rights licenses, but we think that working with the collection societies around the world is currently the most efficient way to provide that service on behalf of our songwriters. If there are new options that come up, we're obviously going to explore them, but I think it's way too early in the game to figure out exactly how that's going to play out.
Okay. So as promised, new topic. So in the panel discussion, in the panel description in the little book, it said that we were going to talk about the Global Repertoire Database. Now, the idea behind the Global Repertoire Database is to create a single source of definitive ownership information for every musical work. And for the past few years, there's been a working group that's comprised of publishers, societies, songwriters, and licensees, and they've been meeting regularly in London to figure out how you would make such a monumental project work. So to say this hasn't been easy would be a bit of an understatement. The project has hit some speed bumps along the way, most recently when the ASCAP board and the SOCAN board both decided that they couldn't support the proposal as it currently stood. So I'm wondering, both Paul and Eric, if you'd like to comment on the state of the GRD and why ASCAP and SOCAN took the decisions they did.
First of all, it's a great idea. The idea, to have one point of access for all that information is a brilliant idea. It's one of the reasons why music, what we're pursuing right now with SOCAN and BMI as far as Music Mark is concerned. We approached the GRD as something that we definitely wanted to do, and as the information began to roll out, frankly, it just didn't pencil out. That it was the investment that was required. We're a not-for-profit membership organization, so we respond to our memberships. We're going to spend the members' money to develop this, if on paper it just doesn't make sense, if there are problems with the returns and problems with governance, where as far as how much we're going to be able to sit at the table and be a participant in this for SOCAN, for ASCAP, for BMI, it did not make sense. That doesn't mean that we've rejected the idea of a GRD. And I think that in the future will hold a different version thereof. And I'll toss it to Eric if you want to add to that.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. I couldn't agree more. The situation about data around the world is not, of course, completely satisfactory. There are databases that have evolved separately over decades, and improvement has been registered over the years, but it's very difficult to synchronize databases that hold dozens of millions of pieces of information and have a fully unified view. So that needs to be improved. But the system is working. The system is working. The flows, the royalties are flowing. The licenses are being issued. The Global Repertoire Database. It's interesting what you said, Catherine, because they're meeting in London. Mm-hmm. And that's not just by accident. They're meeting in London because they were born out of a series of European issues. Regulatory interference by the European government, the European Commission, and also a complicated licensing system in Europe that took everyone by surprise, and they had real contradictions in their billing information. That has been solved since. The European Union organizations have found a way to make sure that the DSPs, the digital services providers, were invoiced accurately. So the Global Repertoire Database is now a different project, less short-term, to improve the accuracy and kind of order of information around the world. But as Paul said, we agree at SOCAN with the goal. Better is something that is desirable, even if the situation is not as bad as some people would like you to think. It's always good to improve, but not at any cost. And if you ask to invest money, songwriters and publishers' money into a project, it's probably because it will have a good return on investment. And when we did the math, when arrived the time for the SOCAN board to decide whether or not to be a full partner in this, the numbers didn't add up. Why spend money in order to be more expensive going forward on a year-on-year basis? I'm very comfortable going to the SOCAN board and recommend investing 1 million, 2 million, or even 15 million over the years like we are doing today, fixing or improving our basic IT system. But I'm not comfortable going there asking for 2 million, 3 million investment plus an annual commitment to fund the operations of the thing if it increases our costs. So the business case was wrong because the approach probably was a bit wrong, too ambitious, too governed by arcane governance rules and interference by consultants. Music Mark, in contrast, and I'm not kind of equating the projects, they're very different. But Music Mark, this collaborative project between ASCAP, BMI, and SOCAN, has a completely different approach. Step by step. We're not to quote one of our colleagues at SOCAN, we're not trying to build a PRO on Mars. It's a very, very pragmatic project. You open a portal to register your works using the CMW format, and then another step, another step, another step. It's benefits now at a very affordable price. And we wish the GRD had been built like that. We probably would have had a much better success. And at SOCAN, I'm sure at ASCAP as well, I know at ASCAP, I know at BMI, I know many societies around the world that have decided to take some distance between the GRD project and them. I know that we want to contribute to fixing the data situation. Once again, not horrible, but not ideal. So we will make proposals, and we hope that we'll find willing partners around the table who will not have kind of a badly placed pride. It's not about being right or being wrong. It's not about being bossy and telling anyone to do this rather than that. It's about finding the best, pragmatic, cost-effective, quickest way to achieve the goals. And the goals have to be a unified, authoritative view of the ownership of control of musical works around the world. That's great, let's do it. But that's not it. We need to fix other things in the music business, in the PRO business. We need to fix the way information about music in audiovisual works is managed, cue sheets and all those things. There is more benefit there potentially if we fix that around the world. There is more money that is not spent on things that should be there because there are more effective ways of doing this. So GRD. Good concept, bad execution so far. Hopefully, we'll be able to fix it, but that's not it. There are other things we need to look after. GRD is not the only silver bullet that will fix all things that are not right in the world.
So, Mary Megan, Eric made the point that the GRD was born in London and a response to a European problem. How serious a problem is the data issue that GRD was proposing to fix? How serious a problem is that for Pure Music?
I think it's a serious problem for all publishers and writers around the world right now. There are licensees who need this data. The publishers want this data. There are a lot of societies, smaller societies than the ones that are represented here today, who certainly could use a lot of help with this data. And as Anglo-American writers and publishers, we stand to benefit from this data being accurate around the world. So I think it's a huge problem. Certainly, though it started with a European Union directive, it addresses issues that are worldwide and are only continuing to grow. So I'm very much in support of the GRD, and I think that as the music community, if we do not do something that creates a database like this, someone else is going to create that database. And I feel strongly that it would be better if we created it internally, knowing how the music industry works around the world, than if we let a third-party data provider create this database and then, frankly, charge us for its use.
So when you say you support the GRD, do you support the GRD as it has been proposed? Or are you saying you support the concept of a global repertoire database?
Well, I certainly support the concept. I think that's something everyone so far has agreed upon. It's absolutely necessary today. As I understand it, next week the GRD board is going to be meeting to review business proposals now that the 3 large North American societies have decided not to participate in this round, to see what they can come up with that would be palatable from both a governance perspective, from a technology perspective, and an investment perspective. It's a very big project, and I think the fact that ASCAP, BMI, and SOCAN all elected to opt out of it for right now shows how difficult governance on such a broad level really is.
So, Justin?
The efficiency that we stand as an industry to gain from something like the GRD, or just a repository of all of our information kept, it creates a lot of redundancy across a lot of societies, I think, around the world. And you're basically asking people to come into a room together and get themselves fired, or put themselves out of business, and in certain ways, in a sort of dream scenario, because there is a lot of redundancy that occurs across all of these societies around the world that are literally processing the same information. We distribute copyright registration information to 36 different societies around the world out of our office in New York, and the dream that you could one day put it in one place that efficiently distributed it to everyone is a dream, and I think that, again, as Mary Megan said, the cost savings for us would be tremendous. The value it plays, it was easily the biggest problem. Whenever we're talking to any licensees, they 10 years ago, they would scratch their head and say, we can't believe that you as an industry haven't worked this out yet. And now it's just comical. And it's gotten to the point where other players who utilize music and invest heavily in growing their business through music and other forms of content are trying to figure this out on their own and saying, can we come up with a solution for the industry? And if I were to bet on big technology companies coming up with something faster than we as a very slow industry have, I'd likely bet on them. And my hope, though, is that we can come up with something internally, because there's a lot of value to be built around that. Beyond just the efficiencies that we can create, I think is, as was alluded to, you look at all of the things beyond that could be built around this database that would save money for songwriters, save money for publishers, and allow us to grow our business.
I think if I could just jump in, I think one of the elements that we're all looking at too is security. We want this to be done really in a secure fashion with great transparency so the writers and publishers that are members of ASCAP or SOCAN or any of the smaller companies can have a really good look at what's going on. I think that, you know, and Mr. Metaphor here, excuse me, but I get very Jiminy Cricket about this whole deal, and also I go, how could I describe this to my mom, you know, if I was trying to describe what we're going through, and what's the solution? When I think about going to the moon, we didn't just go to the moon. We had a suborbital flight, and then we had a longer suborbital flight, and we had, you know, we orbited, then we did multi-orbits, and then we did a flyby the moon, and then we did it. So there are things that are happening right now, like Music Mark, that I think are the beginnings of, we're seeing change in so many of the areas of where we operate our businesses. I think none of us have abandoned the idea of a GRD working. I think it may work in a slightly more fractionalized fashion. I think it's possible that the North American hub and you know, and European hubs, this is evolving. We're not abandoning the idea in any fashion. We just want to make sure that when we're spending members' money for something, that we don't jump in and do something that is just not going to work in the meantime. That money that we spent, while we're sitting here talking with our, you know, our business attitudes and all, somewhere, this is again a metaphor, an image that I turn to again and again. While we're talking, somewhere in Toronto, there's a woman probably writing a song that she's really excited about with headphones on, so she doesn't wake the baby in the next room. And if she manages to tap into that thing in the center of her chest and find something that other people relate to, and they go, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel, and I need to own that music. For this to evolve to a place where she can make a living and go find Mary Megan and say, I'm looking for a publisher, and have all this roll forward. For all of this to happen, we have to be conscious of when and where and how we're spending our members' money at ASCAP, at any of the major PROs. So there is a caution born of respect. I am a songwriter first. I'm president and chairman of ASCAP, but I'm a songwriter. Spent my life writing codependent anthems, you know, ouch mommy songs. But by God, I know how much that when I went to the mailbox and I found that there was something there that would allow me to write one more song, it made a huge difference in my life. And I think that what we're all collectively trying to do is make that difference in the young writers' lives, that they can hang in there, they can finally make their career come to life and all, because we're not going to just throw money at something that doesn't seem to be working as offered right now. But we're not walking away from the table. Show us a better version.
So Eric, both you and Paul have made reference so far this afternoon to Music Mark, and it might be worth taking a minute to explain what that is. You said that it's very different than the GRD, but will it serve the same purpose? Does it do the same thing?
Well, it's different in the scope, the ambition, and the approach. We had the vision with our colleagues at ASCAP and BMI that we represent the world's most valuable repertoire here. I know this may not seem like a modest comment, but the North American repertoire, mostly from the US, but significant portion coming from Canada, is the most important one. And by working together in presenting a view of that repertoire to the rest of the world, with or without the GRD, because if the classic, so-called classic GRD project had gone smoothly, you're talking about waiting until 2018, 2019, or maybe even later to get any first benefits. So we were with John LaFermento and Mike O'Neill, Del Bryant at the time at BMI. We were thinking this doesn't make sense. We already have a pretty good view of the North American repertoire. We can work with the publishers to enhance it and make it available as such to our colleagues around the world, and also use that unified view of the North American repertoire, the one that is controlled by ASCAP, BMI, and SOCAN, to be better ourselves. A lot of the music that is used in the United States is mostly American with a soupçon of Canadian. A lot of the music that is used here is American and Canadian. So by doing this, we already improve our operations. But as the issues with GRD became bigger and bigger, we also felt that this initiative, Music Mark, could be one of those seeds or regional initiatives that could be connected in order to achieve, by different technology approach, the goals of GRD. And I'm not going to speak about technology this afternoon. I'm not an IT person. I'm not a techno geek or whatever. I understand technology enough in order to be able to do my job. But I don't think we should have a view about technology that is like a philosophical or religious. There's no one way to do something. The debate between central and decentralized in databases is something that the music industry has been having for more than a decade. And for IT people, all the ones that I've seen, they don't understand what we're talking about. You can build a very accurate and authoritative database using decentralized technology. You can build a database holding a lot of gibberish and nonsense, even if it's centralized. So MusicMark is something that has a long-term plan. It's working together with ASCAP and BMI, being as efficient as possible in discrete incremental projects, delivering value now rather than hypothetical value in 10 years' time. The first thing that went live on March 31st this year is a portal that enables publishers using the most sophisticated format, Common Works Registration format, CWR, to, if they so choose, register their new works through that portal, and ASCAP, BMI, and SOCAN take care of the rest. It's the first step. Other publishers using less sophisticated formats will have a tool available later this year. And anyone else entering a new work detail through a website, currently the SOCAN website, the ASCAP website, or the BMI website will be able to also do this once through a MusicMark portal. Small stuff, as you can imagine, but it makes a difference. It's our contribution so far to this vision that Justin was sharing with you and that we agree completely with. One, registration. You register your new work once, and then the system populates it. And I can tell you that there is a lot of interest around the world about MusicMark. It's currently a North American initiative, but you would not imagine the number of colleagues that are knocking on my door, on ASCAP's door, on BMI's door. Hey, can we be part of this? So we're very proud of it. There are other things in the pipeline around audiovisual information and things like that. We're very proud of it. It could be the spark to order in incremental steps to bring a better order to our environment and streamline the documentation process from registration to identification of works. Because having the right information in your database is one thing, but the other thing that is often overlooked is using it correctly. Going to all the right efforts to identify all those works, even if they're not yours. And in North America, SOCAN, ASCAP, BMI, we have a big stake in this. We represent songwriters, composers, publishers that have a lot of success around the world. So we depend on our colleagues in other countries to do the right thing, to really identify those works, calculate how much money is owed to Mary Megan's writers, Justin's writers, our members, and send the money to us in a timely and accurate fashion. Accurate documentation is one thing, but also identification tools, having tools that automate the circulation of lists of unidentified performances. This would go a long way in making sure that our members get their fair share. And in this respect, we completely agree with Mary Megan said. We want to make sure that the money flows to us, ASCAP, BMI, and SOCAN in a timely fashion, because we want to distribute it to our members as quickly as possible. And we are the world's biggest exporters of music.
Okay, we have 7 minutes and 43 seconds left and 2 topics left that I'd still like to cover. So the first one, it's been 2 years since Bill C-11, which is the new Canadian Copyright Act, was passed. This bill was considered by many to be a destructive anti-creator move by the Canadian government. Sadly, anti-creator legislation is not limited only to Canada. So those who benefit from the use of creative works seem to have far more influence with governments and politically than those who actually create them. So, Mary Megan, in your opinion, what are the copyright hotspots in the globe, around the globe these days?
Well, I think the question really is where isn't a copyright hotspot around the world these days? You just mentioned Canada, and we've heard a lot. If you've been at any other panel today, I guarantee copyright legislation in the U.S. has been mentioned, the Songwriter Equity Act, all the work that NMPA, ASCAP, and BMI are doing in tandem in Washington to represent the rights of music creators and make sure that those are taken into account as an initiative to study copyright legislation and reform is launched in the U.S. In Europe these days, they're a little bit more advanced in their current review of copyright reform. The European Commission issued a questionnaire, I think it was 75 questions long. They got over 12,000 responses from copyright owners, from licensees, from users, from copyleft movement groups. It was a real issue, and the new European Commission that is coming in this next session is going to be looking at the results of those surveys and figuring out what changes they want to make in copyright reform in Europe. So those are all very large markets that are represented. Another one that I would like to mention, I think, is China. It's a growing music market, and it's certainly going to be a huge market in not a long time. As that economy moves from more of a manufacturing economy to a service economy, and patents and intellectual property law are becoming more important. That's flowing into the music world as well. And I think it's important that there's not only increasing legislation, but also enforcement of the rules in China. So those are some of them, but really you could look almost anywhere. Okay. And it's incredibly important for all of us in this room, in this business.
We could have easily done this entire panel on this subject alone. So I'm now conscious of 5 minutes and 18 seconds, and my last question is the one that I'm actually the most interested in. And we spent a lot of time today talking about the challenges and concerns, and I'd like to end on a more uplifting note. I'd like each of you to share with us a story of innovation at your organization within the past year that you're particularly proud of, and an innovative idea that you're working on for the next year. And I'd like to start again with the publishers. So ladies first, Mary Megan.
Thank you. Catherine told us in advance she was going to ask this question, and a lot of what we do that's innovative, I think of what we work on with new songwriters and current hits and kind of where we're trying to get new things created with today's works. But one of the innovative things we've worked on actually deals with some pretty old copyrights. We consider ourselves very lucky to represent a lot of the songs that you think about when you think about Brazil, the song Mas Que Nada, the song Brazil, and a lot of other standards from that era. And a couple years ago, our worldwide sync team started thinking, well, there's going to be 2 major advertising events in Brazil in the coming years. Obviously, the World Cup, which kicks off next month in Brazil, and then in 2016, the city of Rio is hosting the Olympics. So we figured we had 2 goals. First of all, to make sure that advertising agencies knew that we control these copyrights, and second of all, to make sure that they sounded like something that was approachable in today's advertising market. We were lucky that the Black Eyed Peas remixed Mas Que Nada not too long ago, so that already had a pretty modern sounding twist to it. But our whole worldwide sync staff really put effort into finding different mixes of these songs, getting them organized, getting everything accessible online for music supervisors. We also did some vinyl versions of these works, just to really, emphasize the point that there was a very new sound to a lot of these songs and that it was relevant. So far, we think the project's been pretty successful. It's in 3 major territories, I think, right now. The official World Cup broadcaster will be using one of our copyrights as their theme song. And we've had numerous syncs by World Cup sponsors around the world. And it's a project for 2 years from now, too, with the Olympics coming up. So we're looking forward to it.
Great, thank you. Okay, Justin. There's a minute for each of you left.
Okay, I'll only get to 2 minutes then, down to the 2-minute mark. So for us over the past year, something that I've been very focused on is, we were born out of a record company called Downtown Records, and in 2012 we parted ways with the record company, sold it back to its original founders, and really went down a path of growth over the past year. And one of the things, again, on the creative side for us, I think, is where we have innovated the most, even though we do a lot on admin and a lot with technology. To sort of jumpstart that, we wanted to be more than just a New York company. In the past 12 months, we've opened offices in Los Angeles, in Nashville, and in London, and we have our eyes on 3 more coming up in 2014.
Great. Paul?
I'm so proud of the fact that we continue to stay flexible. We keep upgrading our equipment. The fact that we go from 250 billion to 500 billion performances in 2014 says a lot about the way we operate with the transparency that gets everybody paid really quickly. I'd like to use the little bit of time I have to say one word: advocacy. I'm thrilled about the way that the membership, the way that members of not only ASCAP, BMI, but SOCAN around the world, that the people that are depending upon their music being heard and being able to make a living at it have realized they're a part of the mix. Please step forward. Let us hear your voices. Be a part of the solution and not just sit and look at the problems that we're facing. This is an amazing time where wonderful changes, I think, are in place to happen. I think we're ironing out a lot of, that's a word I've never used in a song, you just saw why. We're ironing out some problems, but one of the great gifts is the willingness of our membership to step up to the plate and say, write to their congressman, show up in Washington, D.C., and help make a difference. Stand up for your rights. Your music creators, your publishers, we need what you give the world. Nice timing. Last minute to Eric.
Besides making sure that we got the best minds in the business to work for SOCAN, and I think we are approaching this because we are a company that only works and thrives if we have the best brain power and the best knowledge. The thing that I believe we did that changed our view of the world the most is going through people who are not SOCAN employees, who work for us mostly as consultants. And I will give you one name, Jeff Price. He has helped us understand the complexities and the opportunities of the digital world. The digital world is way more complicated than people imagine. Even understanding the way creators can benefit or be fooled by YouTube is very helpful for a PRO. Not just to do our work, but also to give advice to our members. So recognizing the fact that we don't have all the answers, that there are things that people know and that we don't know, is one of the things I'm the most proud of.
Thank you. And I'm sorry we don't have time for questions because the clock just went all red and there's nothing but zeros now. But I'm sure if you have a burning question, you might approach one of the panelists now. And we wish you all a very good afternoon, and thank you so much for being an attentive audience.